On the edge of known space where stars flickered like dying embers and law meant little more than the reach of a blaster barrel lived a woman few dared name aloud. She moved through the void not as a conqueror or a traitor, but as a whisper wrapped in shadow. Her name was Lyra Voss, though most who knew it were already dead. Tall and slender, with skin like moonlit pearl and eyes that held the cold gleam of distant galaxies, she was unmistakably alien. Her pointed ears marked her as one of the Siltheria race once famed across the spiral arms for their grace, their wisdom, and their unmatched skill in war. Now they were gone, wiped out in a single brutal campaign by the Galactic Syndicate, and Lyra was all that remained. She wore no armor, only a dark suit woven from self-repairing nanofibers that shifted color to match her surroundings. At her hip hung a blade not of metal but of solidified light shaped by ancient Siltheri techniques lost to time. It made no sound when drawn, yet it could cut through starship hulls like paper. Beside her, always curled close to her side, was Kale. He was small for a dragon, no larger than a house cat, with scales the color of volcanic glass and eyes that burned like twin suns. Though he looked harmless, he was anything but. Kale could breathe plasma hot enough to melt steel, and his mind linked to Lyra's in a silent bond older than human civilization. They spoke without words, sharing thoughts, feelings, and memories in flashes of emotion and image. He was her last tie to a world that no longer existed. Lyra took contracts only from those who could pay in rare isotopes or forgotten data cores, things that held value beyond credits. She never killed for sport, only for purpose. Each mission was clean, precise, and final. She left no witnesses, no evidence, and no room for error. Across 100 systems, rumors spread. Some said she was a ghost. Others claimed she was a machine. None knew the truth that beneath the assassin's mask beat the heart of a woman who had lost everything. Her latest job brought her to the Outer Rim near the human colony world of New Haven. The target was a syndicate warlord named Vorlag, who had betrayed his own faction and fled with a cache of stolen neural disruptors, weapons capable of frying a brain in seconds. The syndicate wanted him dead quietly and quickly. Lyra accepted the contract not out of loyalty, but because the payment included a Siltheri memory crystal, one of the few relics of her people still intact. It was worth more to her than any fortune. She arrived on New Haven under the cover of a dust storm. The planet was green and wet with rolling hills and scattered settlements built from recycled ship parts and local timber. Humans lived here not in towering cities but in modest homes with gardens and wind turbines. It felt strange to Lyra, peaceful, almost fragile. She had seen so much destruction that calm unsettled her. Kyle perched on her shoulder, his claws gently gripping her jacket as they walked through the muddy streets of the main town. People glanced at them but said nothing. Humans were used to odd travelers on the fringe. Vorlag was hiding in an old mining outpost on the northern ridge. Lyra moved toward it at dusk, her steps silent on the damp earth. But as she neared the compound, something felt wrong. The air was too still. The usual hum of generators was absent. She signaled Kale to stay low and crept forward. Inside the outpost, she found Vorlag already dead, slumped over a table with a single shot through his temple. Not her work. Someone else had beaten her to it. Before she could retreat, alarms blared. Syndicate enforcers poured from hidden tunnels surrounding the building. They had set a trap not for Vorlag but for her. The Syndicate suspected she might defect or go rogue. This was a test, and she had walked right into it. Gunfire erupted. Energy bolts seared the air. Lyra moved like liquid shadow, dodging shots and returning fire with pinpoint accuracy. Kale launched himself into the fray, his small body a blur of heat and fury. He melted weapons in soldiers' hands and blinded others with bursts of light. But there were too many. A stun round clipped Lyra's leg, sending sharp pain up her spine. She stumbled. Another shot grazed her arm. Blood welled dark against her pale skin. Kale screeched in rage and dove at the nearest shooter, but was knocked aside by a pulse grenade. He hit the ground hard and lay still for a terrifying moment. Lyra's heart clenched. She couldn't lose him too. With the last of her strength, she triggered a smoke charge from her belt and vanished into the thick gray cloud. She ran not toward the spaceport, but into the wild hills where the Syndicate would not expect her to go. Her leg burned. Her vision blurred. Kale limped beside her, whimpering softly in their shared mind. She knew she couldn't make it far. If she collapsed out here, she would die alone in the mud and rain. Hours passed. The storm worsened. Lightning split the sky. Lyra leaned against a mossy rock, gasping for air. Kale pressed against her side, shivering. She closed her eyes, ready to accept the end. Then a soft voice cut through the rain. "Hey, you okay?" Lyra's eyes snapped open. Standing a few feet away was a human woman holding a rusted flashlight and wearing a patched-up jacket. She had short brown hair wet from the rain and kind eyes that showed no fear, only concern. Behind her stood a battered hover truck, its engine idling softly. Lyra didn't answer. She reached for her blade, but her fingers trembled too much to grip it. The woman took a slow step forward. "Name's Claire. I run the repair shop down near the old water tower. Saw your tracks in the mud. You look like you've had a rough night." Lyra studied her. No weapon, no comm badge, no sign of syndicate affiliation. Just a mechanic with grease under her nails and worry in her voice. "You're bleeding," she added gently, "and your little friend looks hurt too." Cale lifted his head weakly and let out a soft chirp. Claire smiled. "He's beautiful. Never seen anything like him." Lyra hesitated. Trust was a luxury she hadn't afforded in years, but she was out of options. If this was a trap, it was already too late. She nodded once. Claire didn't ask questions. She simply opened the back of her truck and helped Lyra inside. Cale curled into Lyra's lap as the vehicle rumbled to life. The ride was bumpy but warm. Inside the cab, the smell of oil and coffee filled the air. Claire drove in silence, giving Lyra space. They arrived at a small building on the edge of town. Solar panels lined the roof and the yard was cluttered with engine parts and half-built drones. Claire helped Lyra into a back room with a Kata sink and shelves full of tools. She cleaned Lyra's wounds with steady hands and wrapped her arm in a clean bandage. Then she made a nest of blankets for Cale and placed a bowl of warm broth beside him. "You can stay as long as you need," Claire said simply. "No one comes out here unless they're lost or running. Either way, you're safe now." Lyra looked at her. Why? Claire shrugged. "Because everyone deserves a chance to stop running." For the first time in years, Lyra felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not anger, but the faintest spark of relief. She leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. Cale purred softly in his sleep. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. The stars began to peek through the clouds. And in that quiet human room, far from the wars and the whispers, Lyra Voss, the galaxy's most feared assassin, finally let her guard down. Just a little. Just enough to breathe. Days passed in the quiet hum of Claire's workshop. Lyra stayed in the back room at first, barely speaking, barely moving. She watched the human through half-closed eyes as she worked on engines, patched hull breaches, and fixed broken comms units for neighbors. Claire never pried. She brought food, left it by the door, and gave Lyra space. Cale recovered quickly, his scales regaining their deep shine, and his eyes their sharp intelligence. He often followed Claire around the shop, sniffing at tools or curling up on warm engine blocks while she worked. Slowly, Lyra began to emerge. She started by sitting near the open garage door, watching the sky change from dawn to dusk. Then she helped without being asked. She handed Claire wrenches, held wires steady, and once even recalibrated a fusion coil with movements so precise, Claire stared in awe. "You've done this before." Lyra just nodded. On her world, repair and combat were two sides of the same skill. To keep something alive, you had to understand how it broke. Claire learned not to startle her. Lyra moved silently and reacted fast. Once when a drone malfunctioned and sparked near her, she had it disassembled in 3 seconds. Blade drawn before Claire could say a word. But she never raised her voice, never lashed out. She simply fixed the drone and placed it back on the bench. They began to talk in short sentences. Claire spoke of New Haven, how it was founded by refugees from Earth's last corporate wars. People came here to build something real, not to conquer or profit. Lyra listened. She had never known a place like this. On most worlds, strength meant power. Here it meant helping your neighbor fix a roof or sharing seeds after a bad harvest. One evening, as they ate stew made from garden vegetables, Claire asked gently, "Where are you from?" Lyra looked down at her bowl. "A place that does not exist anymore." Claire didn't push. She just nodded. "I get that. My parents died in the Mars riots. Sometimes home is just a memory." Cale chirped softly from his perch on a shelf. Lyra reached out and he leapt into her lap. She stroked his head between the horns. "This is Cale. He is my family." "He's amazing," Claire said. "I've never seen a dragon before. Are there more like him, no?" Lyra said quietly, "Just him. Just me." A silence settled between them, not heavy, but calm. For the first time, Lyra felt no need to hide. She let her silver eyes glow faintly in the dim light. She let her ears show without pulling her hood up. Claire didn't flinch. She just smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world. But peace never lasts long on the fringe. 3 weeks after Lyra arrived, a ship landed at the edge of town. Not a trader, not a freighter. A black wedge-shaped vessel with no markings and engines that hummed too quietly. Syndicate hunters. They moved through the streets asking questions. They showed a hollow image of Lyra to shopkeepers and farmers. "Have you seen this woman?" they asked. "Dangerous. Wanted for high treason." Most locals shook their heads. New Haven protected its own. But one man, a drunk named Ellis, who owed syndicate credits, talked. He pointed toward Claire's shop. "She's been hiding someone," he slurred. "Tall. Strange eyes. Got a weird pet." That night Lyra sensed them before they came. Her Silthari instincts prickled like static on her skin. She woke Kale and stood by the window. 3 figures in dark armor crept through the tree-line, rifles raised. Claire stirred from her cot in the next room. "What is it?" "They found me," Lyra said. Claire didn't panic. She grabbed a pulse pistol from under her bed and joined Lyra at the door. "What do we do? You stay inside," Lyra said. "I will handle this." "No," Claire said firmly. "This is my home too. If they want to fight, they get one." Before Lyra could argue, the first shot rang out. Glass shattered. Kale hissed and flared his wings. Lyra moved fast. She shoved Claire behind the workbench and rolled into the open yard. The hunters fired again, but she was already behind a fuel drum. She drew her blade. It hummed to life, casting a pale blue glow. The first hunter stepped forward. "Surrender, Voss. The syndicate offers you one chance." Lyra said nothing. She lunged. Her speed was unnatural, a blur of motion. The hunter barely had time to raise his rifle before her blade sliced through it and his arm. He screamed and fell. The second fired wildly. Lyra dodged and kicked up dirt into his visor. Kale shot past her like a black comet and melted the man's weapon with a burst of plasma. The third hunter was smarter. He stayed back and activated a sonic emitter. The high-frequency wave made Lyra stagger. Silthari ears were sensitive. Pain shot through her skull. She dropped to one knee. Claire saw her chance. She ran to the shop's control panel and hit a switch. Floodlights blazed on. Alarms wailed. The sudden noise and light disoriented the hunter. Lyra shook off the pain and charged. Her blade found his chest. He fell without a sound. Silence returned. Only the wind and the crackle of burning grass. Claire rushed out. "Are you hurt?" Lyra shook her head, but her hands trembled. Kyle nuzzled her leg, his eyes wide with worry. "They'll send more," Claire said grimly. "Much more." Lyra looked at the burning bodies, then at Claire's face. "I should leave. Now. Before they bring a fleet, and go where?" Claire asked. "Back to running forever. You've done that long enough?" Lyra didn't answer. She had spent years alone believing connection was weakness. But here in this muddy yard with a human who stood beside her even in danger, she felt something shift. Maybe strength wasn't just about surviving. Maybe it was about choosing to stay. The next morning Claire called a town meeting. She didn't say Lyra's name. She just said enemies are coming. People who hurt the helpless. New Haven had to decide. Hide or fight. Most chose to fight. Farmers brought old rifles. Teachers set up barricades. Kids gathered rocks and made slings. It wasn't an army. It was a community. And for the first time, Lyra saw what humans truly were: not weak, not chaotic, but stubbornly kind. They would die for a stranger if it meant protecting their home. Lyra began to train them, not in killing but in defense. How to move quietly, how to spot traps, how to use the land as cover. She showed Claire how to modify pulse rifles to overload syndicate shields. Kyle taught the children how to read heat signatures by watching his eyes. One afternoon as they worked on a turret mount, Claire asked, "Why did you stop running, Lee?" Ra paused. "Because you offered me refuge. Not because you wanted something. Just because it was right." Claire smiled. "That's what humans do. Or at least the good ones." Lyra looked out over the fields. "Maybe my people were wrong. Maybe strength isn't in the blade. Maybe it's in the hand that offers help." That night they heard engines in the distance. Not one ship. Many. The syndicate was coming in force. Dropships dark and angular filled the sky. They would land at dawn. Lyra stood on the roof of the workshop, KL beside her. Below, the town was quiet, but ready. Lights were out. Weapons loaded, hearts steady. Claire joined her. Scared a little, Lyra admitted, but not for myself. For us, yes. Kale made a soft sound almost like a purr. Lyra placed a hand on his head. We protect this place. Together. Claire nodded. Then she reached out and took Lyra's hand. Just for a moment. A human gesture of trust. Lyra didn't pull away. Far above, the stars watched cold and distant. But down on New Haven, something warm burned. Not the fire of war, but the quiet light of people choosing to stand side by side. And in that moment, Lyra Voss, the last Silthari, felt something she had not felt in years. She felt like she belonged. Dawn came not with birdsong, but with the low growl of dropship engines. The sky turned gray as ash as syndicate vessels descended like black beetles onto the fields outside New Haven. They did not come to talk. They came to burn. Lyra stood at the edge of town, wrapped in her dark suit, her blade humming softly at her side. Kale perched on her shoulder scales, rippling with heat. Claire stood beside her, holding a modified pulse rifle, her face set in hard lines. Behind them, the people of New Haven waited. Not soldiers, but farmers, teachers, mechanics, and children, all armed with whatever they could find. They knew they were outmatched. But they also knew they had something the syndicate did not. Each other. The first wave hit fast. Armored enforcers poured from the ships, firing sonic disruptors that shattered windows and made ears bleed. Lyra moved before the first shot landed. She darted between cover, her blade a streak of blue light. One enforcer fell, then two. Kale leapt into the air, breathing short bursts of plasma that melted armor and sent men screaming. Claire fired from behind a water tank, her shots precise. She had spent the night calibrating every weapon to overload syndicate shields. Each hit caused a feedback surge, stunning the enemy long enough for townsfolk to rush in with clubs and stun batons. An old farmer named Hector knocked out a hunter with a wrench. A teenage girl named Maya tripped another with a wire snare. It was messy, chaotic, but it worked. The syndicate commander watched from his command skiff hovering above the battlefield. He was not used to resistance like this. Colonies usually broke in minutes, but New Haven held. He snarled into his comm. Bring in the heavy units, level the town. Within minutes, walkers stomped over the hills, massive machines with rotating cannons and energy shields. They fired into the streets. Buildings exploded. Fire spread. Lyra's heart pounded. She ran toward the nearest walker, dodging fire. She leapt onto its leg and climbed fast. At the cockpit, she drove her blade into the seam. Sparks flew. The machine shuddered and collapsed. But two more took its place. Kyle screeched in pain as a blast grazed his wing. He tumbled to the ground. Lyra cried out in their shared mind and rushed to him. She shielded him with her body as debris rained down. Claire saw them pinned. She sprinted through the smoke, shouting for cover fire. A group of townsfolk laid down a wall of shots, forcing the walkers to shift aim. Claire reached Lyra and pulled them both behind a fallen wall. We can't win like this, she panted. They have too much firepower. Lyra looked at Kyle. He was breathing hard, but alive. Then she looked at the burning town, at Hector helping a child, at Maya reloading her rifle with shaking hands. This place was not just shelter, it was hope, and she would not let it die. There is another way, she said. But it is dangerous, tell me, Claire said. Lyra explained quickly. Beneath New Haven in the old mining tunnels lay a Silthari relic. Her people had hidden it centuries ago when they first visited this world. It was a gravity core, a device that could bend space around a planet. But it had never been activated. It needed a living Silthari mind to guide it, and a dragon's fire to wake it. Claire's eyes widened. You mean Kalius? But the bond will change him. Maybe forever. Claire placed a hand on Lyra's arm. If it saves everyone here, he'll do it. And so will you. They moved fast. While the townsfolk held the line, Lyra, Claire, and Kale slipped into the mine entrance hidden behind a barn. The tunnels were dark and damp. Lyra led the way, her eyes glowing enough to light the path. Deep below, they found a circular chamber. In the center stood a stone pedestal covered in Silthari runes. Lyra placed her hands on it. The runes flared to life. Images flooded her mind, her ancestors' voices whispering in a language long silent. The core was ready, but it needed power. Kale stepped forward. He looked up at Lyra, his eyes full of trust. In their bond he sent one clear thought. Do it. Lyra nodded, tears in her eyes. She placed Kale on the pedestal. Then she placed her own hands on his head and the stone. Energy surged through her. Kale opened his jaws and released a stream of pure plasma into the core. The chamber shook. Light filled the space. Above ground, the Syndicate walkers suddenly froze. Their cannons misfired. The commander shouted in confusion as his ship's systems went wild. Gravity twisted around New Haven. Rocks floated. Rain fell upward. The Syndicate fleet in orbit listed sideways as if caught in an invisible tide. The relic was working, but Lyra felt Kale weakening. His fire dimmed. His body grew still. No, she whispered. Not like this. Claire grabbed her shoulders. He's not gone. Look. Lila looked. Kyle's form shimmered, then dissolved into golden light. The light flowed into the core, then spread through the earth itself. A soft hum filled the air. The entire planet seemed to breathe. Kale was now part of New Haven. His spirit woven into the land, his fire protecting it. On the surface, the Syndicate forces panicked. Their tech failed. Their weapons backfired. They fled to their ships, but the gravity field held them like flies in honey. One by one, their vessels crashed or drifted helplessly into space. By midday, it was over. The Syndicate was gone. New Haven stood scarred, but unbroken. Lyra climbed out of the mine, exhausted. The townspeople gathered around her, silent at first. Then Hector stepped forward and bowed his head. Others followed. They did not cheer. They did not shout. They simply stood with her in quiet respect. Claire hugged her tight. You did it. You saved us. We did it, Lyra said. All of us. That night they buried the dead and rebuilt what they could. Lyra sat on a hill overlooking the town. Kale's presence a warm hum in the earth beneath her. She could feel him in the wind, in the soil, in the quiet pulse of the planet. He was not gone. Just changed. Claire joined her, holding 2 mugs of hot tea. He's still with you, isn't Hayes? Lyra said softly. Always. They sat in silence, watching the stars return one by one. The galaxy was still vast and cruel. But here on this small human world, something new had taken root. Not fear, not war, but courage born from kindness. Lyra knew the Syndicate would not forget. They would come again, but next time they would not face one assassin. They would face a whole world ready to defend its own. And Lyra Voss, the last Silthari, would stand with them, not as a weapon, but as a guardian, as a friend, as someone who finally had a home worth fighting for. Weeks passed and New Haven began to heal. The scars of battle remained, burned walls, patched roofs, and fields that would not grow for a season. But life returned. Children played in the streets again. Gardens were replanted. The hum of Claire's workshop filled the air once more as she repaired what the Syndicate had broken. Lyra stayed. She no longer slept in the back room, but in a small cabin built for her near the edge of town. It had a window that faced the stars and a stone hearth where Kale's warmth still lingered in the air. She could feel him everywhere now, not as a voice but as a presence like sunlight on skin or wind through trees. The gravity core pulsed gently beneath the planet's crust, a silent shield woven from his spirit and her will. People no longer looked at her with fear. They waved when she walked by. They left baskets of bread or fresh fruit at her door. Some even asked her to teach their children how to move quietly or how to listen to the land. Lyra agreed. She showed them how to track animals, how to read the wind, how to stand so still they became part of the shadows. It was not training for war. It was training for awareness, for respect. Claire visited often. They worked side by side, fixing drones or reinforcing the town's perimeter sensors. They spoke little but did not need to. Silence between them was comfortable, like an old song. One evening as they sat on the porch watching fireflies, Claire said the Syndicate won't forget what happened here. I know, Lyra replied. They'll send more, bigger ships, maybe even a dreadnought. Then we will be ready. Claire nodded. But this time we won't just defend. We'll show them that New Haven is not alone. Lyra looked at her. What do you mean? Claire smiled. Word has spread. Other colonies heard what we did. How humans and an alien stood together. How a dragon gave his life to save a world. People are talking. Some are even coming here. Sure enough, ships began to arrive not with weapons but with refugees. Families from mining outposts. Farmers from failed colonies, teachers and healers, all seeking a place where they could live without fear. New Haven grew not by force but by hope. Lyra watched them arrive with wary eyes. Trust did not come easy, but she saw the same look in their faces she had seen in Claire's that first rainy night. Tired, lost, but willing to try. She began to help them settle. She showed them how to build shelters that blended with the land. She taught them to listen for danger not with machines but with their own senses. Slowly, the town became a network of quiet strength. Then the message came. It arrived on a broken comms drone drifting from the outer rim. The signal was weak but clear. The Syndicate had gathered its full fleet, over 200 ships including the Iron Maw. A dreadnought said to carry enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. They were coming not just to punish New Haven but to make an example of it, to show the galaxy that defiance meant annihilation. Panic rippled through the town. Some wanted to flee. Others wanted to dig in and fight to the last. Lyra called a meeting in the town square. She stood on a crate, her voice calm but firm. Running will not save you. The Syndicate hunts across star systems. If you leave, you bring danger to others. Staying gives us one chance. What chance? A man asked. We have no navy, no shields, no weapons that can touch a dreadnought. We have the core, Lyra said. But it was not built for war. It bends gravity, yes, but not enough to stop a fleet of that size. Unless what Claire asked? Unless we awaken it fully, she explained. The relic beneath New Haven was only partially activated. To reach its full power, it needed more than Kale's fire. It needed a living Silthari mind fused with it completely, not just guiding it, becoming part of it. You mean you would have to stay down there forever, Claire said softly. Not forever, Lyra said, but for a long time. Maybe years, maybe more. My body would sleep. My mind would live in the core. I would be the shield. No one spoke. The weight of her words settled like dust. That night, Lyra walked alone to the mine entrance. The air hummed with Kale's presence. She placed her hand on the stone wall and closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw him not as a dragon, but as light as warmth, as a quiet song. Are you ready? She asked. His answer came not in words, but in a wave of calm. Yes. The next morning, the town prepared, not for battle, but for something deeper. They gathered at the mine entrance, holding candles made from old ship wax. Claire stood at the front, tears in her eyes, but her chin high. You don't have to do this, Lyra, she said. Someone must. And I am the only one who can. Claire hugged her tight. Then she stepped back and nodded. Lyra turned and walked into the dark. The townspeople watched in silence. As she reached the chamber, she placed her hands on the pedestal once more. The runes glowed brighter than before. Energy swirled around her. She felt her body grow heavy, her breath slow. Her mind stretched outward, connecting with Kale, with the core, with the very bones of the planet. Above ground, the sky changed. Clouds swirled in perfect circles. Birds fell silent. Then a dome of shimmering light rose from the earth, wrapping around New Haven like a second sky. It was not solid. It was alive, shifting, bending space itself. The Syndicate fleet arrived 3 days later. The Iron Maw led the charge, its cannons charging for a final strike. But as they entered orbit, the dome pulsed. Gravity twisted. Ships spun out of control. Engines failed. Comms died. The dreadnought fired its main weapon, but the beam curved upward and vanished into deep space. The Syndicate commander screamed orders, but nothing worked. His fleet was trapped in a web of warped space, unable to attack, unable to flee. After hours of chaos, the remaining ships powered down and surrendered. On the ground, people cheered, but quietly. They knew the cost. Deep below, Lyra slept. Her body rested in the chamber, her mind woven into the shield. She could feel every leaf, every breath, every heartbeat in New Haven. She was not gone. She was everywhere. Claire visited the mine every day. She sat by the entrance and talked about the town, about the new babies born, about the crops finally sprouting, about the children who left flowers at the stone door. One evening, as she spoke, she felt a warmth on her hand. Not real, not physical, but real enough. She smiled. You're still with us, aren't you? Yes, came the answer, not in sound but in feeling. Always. And so New Haven stood not as a fortress but as a beacon, a place where an alien woman, a human mechanic, and a dragon's sacrifice had shown the galaxy that the strongest shield was not made of metal but of care. And far below in the heart of the world, Lyra dreamed of stars and home and the quiet hum of a friend who never left. Years passed, and New Haven grew not into a city, but into something rarer, a home that welcomed all who sought peace. The shield still shimmered above the town, soft and steady like a breath held in the sky. It did not roar or flash. It simply was. And in that quiet strength the galaxy began to change. News of what happened spread farther than anyone expected, not through war channels or syndicate reports, but through whispers among refugees, through songs sung in cargo holds, through stories told by travelers who had seen the impossible with their own eyes. They spoke of a human colony protected not by armies but by an alien woman and a dragon spirit. They spoke of a place where fear did not rule. Other worlds took notice. Some sent envoys not with weapons but with seeds and blueprints and offers of trade. Others sent their lost ones, their broken ones, their dreamers. New Haven accepted them all. No one asked where you came from. Only if you were willing to help build something better. Claire became the heart of it all. She ran the main workshop still, but now it doubled as a school, a clinic, and a meeting hall. She taught children how to fix engines and elders how to use comms. She never called herself a leader. She just showed up and did what needed doing. Deep below the surface, Lyra remained part of the core. Her body slept, but her mind watched over the land. She felt every sunrise, every rainstorm, every laugh in the square. She could not speak in words, but sometimes people felt her. A sudden calm in a storm. A warmth on a cold night. A sense that they were not alone. Claire visited the mine entrance every week. She brought tea even though Lyra could not drink it. She talked about the town's joys and worries. Once she brought a small plant and placed it by the stone door. It bloomed white flowers that glowed faintly in the dark. No one knew why. Then one spring morning a ship landed on the edge of town. It was small and battered, its hull patched with mismatched metal. The ramp lowered and a figure stepped out. She was young, no more than 16, with silver eyes and pointed ears. Her clothes were torn and her hands were calloused, but she stood tall. She looked around with wide eyes as if she had dreamed of this place her whole life. Claire met her at the gate. "Who are you?" The girl swallowed hard. "My name is Alira. I am Silthari, or I was told I am the last." Claire's breath caught. She looked past the girl to the hills where the shield shimmered in the morning light. Then she turned back and smiled. "You're not the last. Come inside. You're home." Alira followed her into town, eyes wide at the sight of humans working alongside aliens of all kinds. She saw a reptilian farmer sharing tools with a human child. She saw a bird-like trader selling fruit to a cyborg. It was nothing like the stories of war and greed she had heard in the Outer Rim. They sat on Claire's porch and Alira told her story. Her parents had hidden her in a cryopod during the Syndicate purge. She woke years later alone on a dead moon. She spent years drifting until she heard the legend of New Haven, of a Silthari woman who stood with humans, of a dragon who became a shield. She did not believe it at first, but hope is a stubborn thing. That night Claire took her to the mine entrance. Alira placed her hand on the stone and gasped. She felt it immediately, the presence warm and ancient and familiar. Tears filled her eyes. "She's here," yes, Claire said softly. "She's been waiting for you." From that day, Alira stayed. She learned from Claire how to repair engines and from the townsfolk how to plant crops. But she also began to listen to the land the way Lyra once had. She sat by the river and felt its current. She walked the hills and knew when rain would come. Slowly, she began to understand the bond between her people and the world. One evening as the sun set, Alira stood at the edge of the shield and closed her eyes. She reached out with her mind, not to control but to connect. And deep below, Lyra stirred. Not fully, but enough. A pulse of light rippled through the dome. The stars above seemed to brighten. Claire watched from the porch and smiled. Life on New Haven settled into a rhythm of work and rest, of teaching and learning. The Syndicate never returned. Not because they were destroyed, but because they were forgotten. Other powers rose and fell, but New Haven remained untouched, not by luck, but by the quiet truth that some things are too precious to break. Years turned to decades. Claire's hair turned gray, but her hands were still steady. Alira grew into a strong young woman, teaching the next generation the old ways and the new. The shield never faded. It simply became part of the sky, like the moon or the wind. One quiet night, Claire sat by the mine entrance, as she always did. She was older now, her steps slower, but her heart light. She placed a cup of tea on the stone and whispered as she always did. "We're doing okay, Lyra. Better than okay." For a moment the air grew warm. A soft hum filled the space, and Claire knew she was heard. The next morning Lyra found her asleep on the bench, a smile on her face. She had passed peacefully in the night, wrapped in the quiet peace she had helped build. They buried her under the white flowering tree by the workshop. The whole town came. Even those who had arrived just weeks before stood in silence. Lyra placed a single silver leaf on the grave, a Silthari sign of eternal friendship. That night Lyra stood alone at the mine entrance. She placed her hand on the stone and spoke not with words but with feeling. "I will keep watch now. You rest." Deep below the core pulsed gently, and for the first time in many years Lyra's mind drifted into true sleep. Not gone, but at peace. New Haven endured, not as a fortress, not as a legend, but as a promise that kindness is not weakness, that refuge is not surrender, that even the most feared assassin can find a home if someone is brave enough to offer one. And under the watchful stars, the shield glowed softly, a silent song of dragonfire, human hands, and a woman who finally stopped running.